Hello. Hi guys, I'm talking to you today about the research process. So the first step in the research process is to choose your topic. So that's what we're discussing in the discussion board is what is your topic going to be. So be sure you check out that handout. Make sure you also notice my 3 rules. 3 topics that I do not accept. That is, you're not allowed to kill people, babies, or brain cells. So I don't want to read about capital punishment or abortion or marijuana or anything like that. I've read 1,000 of those papers and I just really don't want to read any more of them. So besides those few topics, pick something that matches one of those 3 areas that I've given you and, decide on a pretty solid topic to get started. All right, so then once you decide on a topic, you have to choose your sources. So you need at least 3 sources for this paper, but I will tell you up front, most of my students end up having somewhere between 5 and 6 to actually get this paper done. And here are a couple things you need to think about when you're looking for sources. You need to make sure that they're logical sources so that these sources present their information logically. They don't seem overly emotional. The writer seems pretty credible. Someone who is an expert in that field or is using good research. And also you need to make sure that it is timely. If you choose to do a current event, which is one of your options, obviously writing about Syria using an article from 20 years ago is not a good idea. So you need to make sure that you're choosing sources that are timely depending on what your topic is. All right? So overall, though, you want to make sure that you're choosing logical, credible sources because you need solid sources to make a solid paper. Make sure you're building your house on a rock, right? Have a good foundation. So where can you look for those kinds of sources? Databases are wonderful. Websites, news outlets are all great places to start. Where you don't want to look are general knowledge sites. So these are things like about.com, Yahoo, Wiki Answers, Yahoo Answers, really anything that starts with wiki. That includes Wikipedia. Because they're open source, anyone can change them and add information, and so those aren't sources that you want to use. All right, and also you want to be very careful with blogs because, some random person who decides they're going to write about nuclear fusion doesn't mean that they're actually a nuclear engineer. So be very, very careful with blogs. That's probably something you should stay away from. What you really want to look for are scholarly journals, trade journals. If you're looking at, a political situation, maybe a current event, someone who is an expert in that country or that field or that time period. So make sure you're choosing very credible sources. One thing I do want to talk about is the database and how to use the database. So first of all, I want to show you how to get to the database. And it's also my cousin's birthday. But here is the Crowder homepage. And if you click on current students and you go to Lee Library, not student services, Lee Library. This is the name of the library on Crowder's campus. You can see over here on the right hand side are the journal databases, and so you can just click on all databases. Something that is probably particularly important to you are this link right here. Passwords for home access. So if you are off campus, you can still access all of these databases. And so if you click on that, it takes you down to the bottom and it shows you that to get in, your username is your campus ID number and your password is your last name with a capital first letter. By the way, if you have a hyphenated name or something like that, it's whatever last name Crowder uses on their official paperwork they send to you. So that's what you need to type in there. All right, so as you can see, there are a lot of databases that Crowder subscribes to. The 3 most common ones just across academics is Academic Search Complete, Elite, and Premier. They all do something a little bit different. They all look for different types of sources. Academic Search Complete really strives to include just about every published source out there, regardless of whether it's particularly scholarly or not. So you do want to be careful with Academic Search Complete. Elite and Premier are much more particular about what they choose to put in there, and so you'll find more scholarly information in Elite and Premier. All right, if you're doing anything on education, you want to use this one right here. This is ERIC. It's the educational database, and all it does is gather sources that relate to education. So if you're doing anything with schooling, anything with kids, that's what you want to take a look at. Also, if you're doing anything current events, we do subscribe to the New York Times, current and historical, and so if you need newspaper sources, those are excellent to use. All right, and then also opposing viewpoints and context. What this one does, this is a Gale rather than an EBSCO, but what it does is it chooses some of the most common topics out there, and it gathers articles for both sides. So this is a great way to gather information for two sides in an issue. However, I will warn you that these are really like current hot topics, so a lot of those topics are not topics I'm going to let you use. So you may or may not actually find your topic in there. But anyway, those are a few. There are a lot of them that we subscribe to, so be sure to look through these. The one I will show you, of course, today is Academic Search Complete. It is the largest database that any school uses. So I'm going to log in here, and then we'll get going. Alright, so I'm logged in and I'm working on this at home, so I had to log in too, just like you guys probably will. Whenever you open a database, it always starts with a basic search, but you do not want to use that, so go to the advanced search always. And what it does is it allows you to do Boolean searching, and that is that it uses these phrases, these and, but, and, ors, and nots, to help you narrow and widen your search. So if I'm looking for something on Shakespeare, so it'll let me, not sharks, Shakespeare, and let's say I want to do something on Hamlet. By the way, it gives me a bunch of different ideas for Hamlet topics, but I do not want the movie. There is a, great movie of Hamlet. I don't want any of the movie information. All of my sources I want to be about the play. So those are some ways to use these to narrow down exactly what you want. I can also add more lines, and I can even choose an or. So I could put Hamlet or Ophelia, if I wanted to talk about multiple characters. If you're doing something like researching children, something with children, you could put child or adolescent, or child or teenager. So this would widen your field. You could also exclude things by using the word not. So if you keep getting sources that don't have to do with your topic, you could say not and add that particular phrase, and it should cut all of those out of your search results. Okay. Also down here we have full text. I highly suggest that because then the source is right there for you rather than having to then enter library alone or go find the source somewhere else. Your other option is scholarly or peer-reviewed journals, and I want to make sure that we talked about this. A peer-reviewed journal works like this. If I wrote an article and I submitted it to the National Council of Teachers of English magazine, what they would do is they would take my article and send it to my peers, that is, other teachers of English. And my peers would review that article and either approve it or send it back for revision. And so any article that is published in a scholarly peer-reviewed journal has been reviewed by the writer's peers, which means this is one of the best, most scholarly sources available. So if you're looking for really good quality sources, you want scholarly peer-reviewed journals. Okay? It also allows you to change some other things. You can change the language, when it was published, all kinds of things like that. So you can look through those. But anyway, so I search. And there's a few things that I want to show you once you actually do search. So I have 511 results, which really isn't too bad considering this is the largest database anywhere. All right, so I can adjust the publication date. Remember I told you that your sources need to be timely, especially if you're doing a current event. So you can change when the information has been published. You can, add limiters over here. You can also decide what type of source you're looking for, all kinds of things like that. But anyway, once I have run the results and I find a particular source that sounds interesting, I can look at the abstract and see if this sounds like something I might want to use. And of course, I can take a look at the PDF full text. So then once I've decided that this is a source that I want, you need to do a couple of things. First of all, I strongly suggest that you create a login in EBSCO. By the way, you will need to create a different login in Gale if you also do this in Gale. And so you create a sign-in. This works for any EBSCO host database. And then as you find sources, what you want to do is go over here and click Add to Folder. This essentially allows you to create a folder of your sources that, as long as you have access to EBSCOhost, you will be able to get into for years and years and years. So they're not going to delete your information. Okay? But you have to sign in first. If you just add sources to the folder, once you log out of the computer, it dumps all those sources and won't keep them. So you have to have a login first. It's very simple. It's free. And I highly suggest that as a way to keep all your sources in one place. Anyway, something else I wanted to show you is that the database is driven by subject terms. And what that means is basically this is the database's vocabulary, what the words that it would use to find these types of information, so these sources. And so you can see that these particular subject terms bring about this kind of source. So if you really like this source, these are the types of subject terms you want to put up here. So I strongly suggest looking at the subject terms when you find a particular source that you do like. Now, if you're struggling to find anything in a database and you just say, I just can't find anything on my topic, a lot of times it's not because there's not the information out there. A lot of times it's because you're not using the right words yet. So if you're struggling to find sources, you should come up here to subject terms. And what subject terms is the vocabulary list that the database uses. So if you're having a hard time finding something for your topic, come here, type in some of the words around your topic and see what words the database uses in regards to that topic. And hopefully that will help you find more sources than you otherwise would be able to. So there's a little bit about using the database. Okay, so back to this. So you need to find at least 3 sources. By the way, remember at least one of your sources needs to be for the opposing side because you need to be able to argue both sides. So keep that in mind as you're working, okay? All right, then you need to gather those sources and create source citations. So that's what I'm asking you to do for Monday is have a sheet, a Word document that you will upload to OneDrive that lists your 3 sources that you have found so far. And what you need to do is create a works cited citation for each of them. I also put a handout in this week's folder, so make sure you take a look at that, and it shows you how to do the most common types of sources. Okay, and so here is what a works cited citation looks like. Notice that you indent every line after the first. So the first line, this is called a hanging indent. The first piece of information hangs over the edge. I do author's last name, first name, the title of the article that I'm looking at, the original source that it came from. So this originally was published in Christian Science Monitor. Notice the way we do dates. So this is the date it was written, but notice we do day, month, year, and the month is only 3 letters. Okay, so that's how you should do that. And then the name of the database that you found it from. I found mine from Academic Search Elite. By the way, EBSCO is not a database. It is a company that gathers databases. So don't put EBSCO in here. You need to actually put the name of the actual database you found it from. Okay, and then the URL. It also says the DOI, but EBSCO does not use DOIs, and so you have to put the URL in there. Notice I do not use HTTP. Okay, so you don't put that on there. And then finally the date of access, same thing, day, month, year, and you also put accessed before it. Okay, so you need to number them. I suggest you put them in alphabetical order to number them and type out the works cited citation for your 3 sources. Now, if you have a source that is not one of the types of sources on that handout, where else can you go to find out how to cite them? Well, the place you want to go is OWL Purdue. So let me show you how to get there. Yeah, I use Google, but whatever your search is, I go to OWL Purdue, if I can spell, MLA. All right, so I Google OWL Purdue, and the reason I Google is the web address is actually really long, and so it's just easier to Google it. But anyway, I go to Purdue OWL, so that's the Online Writing Lab, OWL. And this is done by Purdue University, and it is the foremost authority on MLA citing. So unless you want to go out and buy a $50 MLA handbook, I strongly suggest that you use this. So what I love about it is it breaks everything down. If you are wanting to know how to cite a book, this is where you come. By the way, this is also under the books, where it includes how to do weird things with authors. So if you have more than one author, this is where you look. If you have 3 or more authors, you can do this with et al. If you have 2 books by the same author, and by the way, that works the same for magazines or anything else. If you have a corporate author, that is the American Heart Association or something of that nature. Okay, so it goes through what to do if you have any of those weird situations with authors. That's all under books. Periodicals are magazines and newspapers, so anything that's published periodically, it will show you how to do any of that. The most frequently used section is, of course, the electronic sources. This includes everything from how to do a web page, to an article in a web magazine, to an article in a journal, okay, to an online database. It does even do how to do email interviews. It does show you blog posts, but you're not supposed to use that. You can even use a tweet, although I don't want you to use those for this paper. And even a YouTube video. So pretty much anything you need to know how to cite, OWL Purdue will show you how to do it. There's also a sample works cited page here, as well as a sample paper. So if you want to take a look through this, I think it will be very beneficial. So if you have any questions on citation, this is where I'm going to send you to reference the answer. All right, so always go there if you have a question. If you still can't figure it out, feel free to let me know, and I will be happy to help you do that. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. In my on-ground classes, they turn in actual cards, but since we're online, I'm just going to ask you to turn it in a Word document, but you will type out 3 of these citations for your 3 sources, okay? And make sure that you number each of them. So, after you've created source cards, then you have to begin gathering facts, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and talk about that here since we're already in this. All right, so here is what a fact card would look like. The thing you need to know is when I say you need to gather facts is that when I mean a fact, I mean a sentence. Okay, so I'm not looking for a paragraph or anything like that. Typically, they say 10 facts per page of the paper. So since this is a 3 to 4 page paper, you need at least 30 facts. All right? When you do cards, you put 1 fact per card. The reason you do this is it makes it much easier then to move them around to create an outline. So each fact should stand on its own, okay? And then once you've decided this is a fact that I will use in support for one side or the other in my paper, you have to decide whether you're going to summarize or paraphrase that information, or if you're going to quote it. Now, most of your facts should be summarized, that is, put in your own words. And in the discussion board for week 11, we'll talk about the difference between summarizing and quoting and how you do that. But if you're going to use a fact and you're going to quote it, you should only quote it because of one of 3 things. Number 1, the fact includes numbers, statistics, because there really aren't that many ways to say 96%. If it includes terminology or lingo that there's just not another way to say. So if you're using some kind of medical terminology or something like that, obviously you can't reword those. And finally, if the person who is speaking is very famous or what they said was very famous. So if you're using the I Have a Dream speech from Martin Luther King, obviously you would just quote that. Other than one of those 3 reasons, you should summarize your facts because this is your paper and it should be in your words. All right? So summarize most of your facts, and you should do that for your fact list. Okay? Don't tell me I'm going to put in quotes now and I'll summarize it for the paper, because you won't. I've done this a long time. So I want you to summarize now. I do not want to see a bunch of quotes on your sheet that you'll turn in. Okay? So this is what it would look like if you were doing an actual card. You would write the 1 fact. And then if you have a page number, it would go in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, a lot of electronic sources, I should say, don't have page numbers, and that's okay. Please don't make up a page number. Not all of your facts came from page 1. You only use page numbers if you have the pages from the original source. So if it came from a magazine, what page did that fact originally appear on in the print source? If you don't have that information, if it's, you don't have it printed on the PDF that you found in the database, or it came from a web page and the web page doesn't have page numbers, then you just don't have page numbers, and that's okay. All right, so you should have quite a few facts from each source. So maybe you have 20 facts from one source. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to spread them evenly over the sources. But please remember, you have to have at least one fact from the source to count it as a source, because the works cited page is called that, the works cited. So if you're not going to cite that work in the paper somewhere, you don't get to put it on the works cited page. So if you don't have any usable facts from a source, you don't get to count it as one of your sources. All right? So to make fact cards for this class, what I'm going to have you do is just type them out in a Word document individually, so each sentence on its own, and you'll put a number in front of it, and that is your source number that it will reference. So it will connect to the source number. So as you can see, this fact comes from my source 1. Well, where did that 1 come from? Well, it came from my source card, this source, because it had a number 1. Every fact card that comes from that source also gets a number 1. So you may have 20 facts with a number 1 in front of them. That's perfectly fine. That tells me that this fact came from source number 1, or this fact came from source number 2. All right? So that's what you need. So give it the source number it came from, then give me the fact, and then after it, if you have a page number, give the page number that fact comes from. Just a few things to keep in mind also. The point of doing that is to keep you from plagiarizing. If you already connect every fact with its source, it's very easy to write the in-text citations and to remember that these aren't your ideas, so that you remember to cite them. The real idea here is to keep you from plagiarizing. Okay, so all of this is to help you avoid any temptation to plagiarize. So, also remember that you need to gather facts for both sides of the argument. So make sure as you're working on these 30 facts that you have information for what both sides say. All right, that's all I have for you. If you have questions for me, feel free to send me an email, and I will be happy to help you with those things. Have a great day.